TPLF is no longer an existential threat to the well-being of the nation. And former Nairobi mayor urges Egypt to come to AU-led negotiation over Ethiopia's Grand Dam. Hello and many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. The goal of TPLF is not to succeed in fighting against the National Defense Force, as they are fully aware that they can't beat it. And this is why they have resorted to dragging others down to ashes. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed made these remarks while explaining the purpose of the unilateral ceasefire in the state of Tigray to journalists. Habtamu Ashagri tells you more.
ሌላው መቀሌን ትናንት መልቀቅ ስንጀምር በጣም ብዙ
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the redeployment of the National Defense Force comes due to less imminent power of TPLF and to make the nation focus on other businesses. While addressing journalists, the Premier said the government of Ethiopia has been analyzing concerns for a week before the announcement of the ceasefire in the state of Tigray. TPLF is fully aware of the fact that it can't beat the National Defense Force, Abiy said. It has therefore restored to turn things into ashes just like its gangs during the law enforcement operation, Abiy underscored.
የቲፒኤልኤፍ ዓላማ ማሸነፍ አይደለም በተደጋጋሚ ሰሞኑን ሲናገሩ ሰምታችኋል.
As you have seen before, the TPLF has no prospect of winning the battle. Rather, they want to turn things into ashes like what happened in the military operation. They are preparing strategy and tactics how to demolish things in the region. This is the only objective they have had now. I can also mention so many showcases how we are under pressure to discontinue our smart development plan to the nation. This pressure comes from foreign countries.
ላነሳላችሁ ይችላል አሁን ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ
Realizing the law enforcement operation, the Ethiopian National Defense Force has been confronted with armed groups, but now armed individuals are attacking the defense force at the back. The government of Ethiopia has decided on the ceasefire as part of the move being made to tackle the negative impact of conflicts and instabilities in Tigray.
እኛ ከሄድን በኋላ ምን ይዘውን ይዘን ምን መታውን መተን ተጥቆቻችንን ወስደን
Having finalized the law enforcement operation in Tigray, we have no objective to stay in the state of Tigray. After finalizing the operation properly, we have a plan to deploy our defense force into other fronts. We need preparation for other forces that threaten the nation. It is a priority concern. The nation has various priority lists to handle. Now, we have not any economic and military threat from TPLF. Thus, there is no advantage to stay in the state of Tigray.
ሀገርም እንደዛ ናት ቅደም ተከተላላት ፍላጎቶቿን
Abiy also said the move is also part of the measures taken to give some silent period to the general public.
እኛ የወሰነው የሀገር መከላከያ ሰራዊት ማስ የሆነውን ህዝብ እንደ ጠላት ወስዶ
We are deciding on the defense force to leave the state of Tigray to protect our forces not to take black point against the people of Tigray due to conflict-prone areas in the region. We have decided to move the security forces into other areas. As a government, we never invite our defense forces to take any wrong blame to the nation's history. We are also making the move to give silent period to the people of Tigray.
After a month, everyone can see the unprecedented role of the defense forces as well as the government in the state of Tigray, the Prime Minister pointed.
State Minister for Foreign Affairs Redwan Hussein says the unilateral ceasefire attempts to address the major concerns of the international community for cessation of hostility, unimpeded access to the region, and the withdrawal of Eritrean troops. Similarly, Lieutenant General Bacha Dabeli said the Ethiopian army was evacuated from Mekelle because the city has ceased to be the center of gravity capable of posing a threat to the nation and the federal government. Kasahon Chane reports.
Lieutenant General Baja Dabale and State Minister for Foreign Affairs Ambassador Redwan Hussein have issued a joint statement on the ceasefire agreement in Tigray State. In line with the government's decision, Ambassador Redwan addressed the international community to scale up much needed humanitarian support to the people of Tigray, noting giving due attention to the recent TPLF bravado belittling a ceasefire and threatening to launch attacks against the Amhara region and Eritrea. Lieutenant General Baja Dabale, Chief of the Armed Forces, accentuated that the Ethiopian army was evacuated from Mekelle because the city has ceased to be the center of gravity, supporting a threat to the nation.
TPLF አሁን ያለበት ደረጃ ለመድረስ ሳይሆን የፈለገውን ዓላማ
The junta in Tigray State had been able to fight with the defense forces for only 3 weeks in the first place. It tried inciting the people against the army in the past few months. In addition to working to deter the people, the TPLF has now reached a point where it can no longer be a significant threat to Ethiopia. Ethiopia decided to withdraw from the region as it was necessary to prepare for some other obligation to defend the nation's sovereignty.
State Minister for Foreign Affairs Ambassador Redwan Hussein on his part said the government's ceasefire in Tigray State was a human political decision. According to Ambassador Redwan, the decision has been made to enable farmers in Tigray State to enter the fields before the end of the harvest season.
መስሎት ለሚጨነቅም ይሄን አጋጣሚ እንደ ሰበብ ለሚጠቀምም አካል ምክንያት ላለመሆን መጀመሪያ ታክስ አቁም መደረግ አለበት እሱን አቁመናል
The government's separate ceasefire in Tigray State was a political decision. If the political decision is changed, it is still necessary to enter Mekelle. The government has decided to allow farmers in Tigray State to do agricultural activities before the end of the harvest season. Ethiopia intends to reduce the international pressure associated with Grand Renaissance Dam. The government has spent more than 100 billion birr on humanitarian assistance to Tigray State. The government had declared a ceasefire and that it had withdrawn its troops to prevent further waste of resources.
Redwan also said Ethiopia has been facing international-wide solution and harassment in connection with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The current diplomatic pressure on the ongoing use of individual and collective military exercises have great significance to the need to mobilize national capacity.
My opinion, yes, Ethiopia has been generous throughout this decade-long negotiation. I do believe in principle Ethiopia has the right, it's a sovereign country, and has the right to develop itself using its own share of water that originates in its own territory. Because they are still holding their colonia. I think that fear, 2 points, it shows exactly who Egypt and Ethiopia is historically. One is relying on the Pan-Africanism value. The other one is showing Egypt, Africa for Egypt, it has been always the last source. They always, their politics is, it's either nationalism or Pan-Arabism.
You're watching Addis News Hour. Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, has welcomed the declaration of the humanitarian ceasefire in the Tigray region by the federal government of Ethiopia as a right step towards the resolution of the conflict. The chairperson called on Ethiopian authorities to work towards a comprehensive and all-encompassing permanent ceasefire to pave the way for sustainable peace in Tigray. In this regard, the chairperson called for the end to all hostilities and called on all parties to uphold their responsibilities under international law to protect civilians and guarantee safe access for humanitarian actors to render crucial services to the affected populations in the region. The chairperson further called for a political solution to the conflict in the Tigray region. The chairperson reaffirmed the continued readiness of the African Union to support all Ethiopian efforts in the pursuit of peace and stability in the country. China has also welcomed the ceasefire in Ethiopia's Tigray region, pledging support to all parties to realize national reconciliation through dialogue, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin told a regular press briefing on Tuesday. We also believe that they have the wisdom and ability to handle internal affairs well, Wang added. The Ethiopian government announced late on Monday a unilateral ceasefire in the country's Tigray regional state, following a request by the Tigray Regional State Interim Administration. The ceasefire is intended to facilitate humanitarian assistance in the region, as well as agricultural activities amid the approaching rainy season, according to CGTN.
The Nile's main source, the Blue Nile, starts in Ethiopia at Lake Tana. The river flows towards Sudan and joins the river's other tributary at Sudan's capital, Khartoum, before heading downstream to Egypt. GERD is being built here, on the border with Sudan, near the Blue Nile source. The dam will catch water in its massive reservoir, whose surface area is larger than that of Greater London.
A former Nairobi mayor, Dr. Joe Akech, called on Egypt to come to the negotiation table over the GERD issues with Ethiopia under the auspices of the African Union. He says Ethiopia, being the source of the Nile, has every right to harness the water for its socio-economic development. Demis Mokriao has sent us the following report.
Three things that Ethiopia should me.
Former Nairobi mayor and chairman of Ethio-Kenya Friends Association, Dr. Joe Akech is a long-time friend to Ethiopia. Decades before, Dr. Akech attended education in the current Kotebi Metropolitan University, and ever since that time, he has been working to cement Ethio-Kenya relation in various aspects. In an exclusive interview with ETV, Dr. Akech mentions the issue of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Ethiopia being the source of 85% of water to the Nile, Dr. Akech underscored that it has both legal and ethical grounds to use Nile for a variety of purposes, including building hydro dams across the river.
I think what has happened is that 85% of the water from Ethiopia goes to River Nile. And I think the most important thing is, if Ethiopia has got its own water, they have their own right to use their own water. They have their own right to use the 85% of the water that they contribute to the River Nile. They can, by coming up with a dam, you're talking of creating more development for the people of Ethiopia. You are talking of giving more jobs to the young people of Ethiopia. You're talking of Ethiopia having more electricity in the country. Because right now I don't think we have almost 40%, but if we can have that dam, definitely we're going to go into 85% of Ethiopia having electricity. We're talking of Ethiopia exporting that energy so that it can also grow up like any other country in Africa.
According to Dr. Akech, Ethiopia has no obligation to accept any colonial treaties that were signed to determine the water share of Nile, denying its natural rights. Dr. Joe Akech also calls on Egypt to believe in negotiation, and he underlines that the negotiation has to be executed under the auspices of African Union. He underscores that any attempt to incite fear and intimidation against Ethiopia will not bring any fruitful result to the Egyptian people, and he advises the country to move into honest discussion.
If there's a problem by any organization, maybe Egypt and whatever, the only best way they can do is go through arbitration, and they have to go through African Union, because that is the mother of all that's the mother that representing Africa. We don't have to go to Washington. We don't have to go to United Nations Security Council. Let us first start here at the AU and find out what is the problem. But through intimidation, creating fear, that will not work because Ethiopia has done so much, and Ethiopia also wants to develop like any other country in Africa. So why should they be denied their own water so that they can come up with their own dam? I'm supporting it.
Dr. Akech also talked about his support to Ethiopia concerning the dam, and he expressed his will to push Kenyan government to stand with Ethiopia on the issue of a GERD.
The only way we can persuade the Kenyans to talk about it is maybe me to use my approach to the Kenyan parliamentarians, for instance, and say, hey, this is the situation. So that is one way we can use. And then the other one is to use our Senate and say, listen, there is a problem. And it's not a big problem because the water belongs to Ethiopia. Why would we have intimidation? Let's come up with some kind of a solution that will be agreeable to everybody in Egypt, in Southern Sudan, in Kenya, and because Kenya has got no problem with Ethiopia anyway. So to me, I think the issue of intimidation against Ethiopia, the issue of creating fear to Ethiopia, The water belongs to Ethiopia, and let Ethiopia using its own discretion.
Ethiopia is currently preparing for the second filling of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, with a plan due to proceed in July and August.
አሰራሩ በጎንደር ከተማ ከሚገኙ የአብያተ መንግስታት ግብረ ህንጻዎች ጋር በእጅጉ ይመሳሰላል። እነዚህ የጎንደር ተከታታይ ነገስታት በኢትዮጵያ ዛሬም ድረስ የሚጎበኙ ድንቅ የታሪክ አሻራዎችን ጥለውልን አልፈዋል። ከዛ መካከል አንዱ ይህ የጉዛራ ቤተ መንግስት ነው።
Welcome back again. Founder and director of the leading Pan-African communications consultancy APO Group, Nicolas Pohnpeigne, has called for intensified efforts to fully capacitate African national media for the well-being of the continent. Nicolas exclusively told ETV English that media has the power to change the old narrative of Africa. Alula Teklamariam reports.
APO Group is a leading Pan-African communications consultancy. Established in 2007, the company said it has been assisting private and public organizations in sharpening their reputation and increasing their brand equity in target countries. The rising influence of international media organizations in the African continent seems to be a concern to the prominent lawyer and media expert Nicolas Pohnpeigne.
That's, by the way, the issue we have as a continent. We are receiving all those international media. I do not see a reaction which is at the level it should be. I mean, again, media are important. I don't know. Maybe for some people, it's when the media landscape will be so poor that you won't be able to rely on it, that people will realize what they have lost and how important it was. Maybe it's one of those things when you have to lose it to realize how important it was. Maybe for some people, but I mean, media landscape, a healthy media landscape is extremely important for governance, for democracy, for development, for health. We mentioned that for WHO, etc. So we cannot just witness that and just wait for the international to take over. And I also mentioned that question about sovereignty. It's a huge problem on its own. I mean, and for instance, government should see that. Even with their, even if they are only focusing on their own, interests, they should see that, well, it's not good for them if the international media are shaping the opinion in their country.
Talking to ETV, Nicolas highlighted what the APO Group and the Getty Image agreed to change the wrong narrative of Africa.
Basically, make more and more content, both image, press releases, but also video, in fact, because Getty Image also distributes video about Africa available to the international media, so they can see the real face of the continent. In other words, the partnership between APO Group and Getty Images is about changing the image of the African continent, one image and one press release at a time, if you wish.
The chairperson further expressed the need to intensify efforts to rebuild the good image of Africa.
I will be surprised a little bit, surprised by the image the international media are conveying about the African continent. They tend to display the continent as only conflict and poverty and those kind of bad news. While in fact, as a journalist, we know that, and I knew back in 2007 when I created the company, that there were already very good news about the continent. It's just that those international media never had the access to those information. So I've decided to build that company really to change the narrative about the continent, to influence the narrative about the continent. And I used a very simple but efficient way, which was to make good news, neutral and good news, available to the international media.
In business news, Ethiopia is keen to have Chinese engagement in the coffee sector to boost value addition. Adunya Debela, Director General of the Ethiopian Coffee and Tea Authority, told Junwa in a recent interview that as part of the ongoing efforts, Ethiopia has launched an initiative to lure Chinese investors to join local coffee roasters for value addition and increase direct coffee export to China. Ethiopia, which is presently working to penetrate the Asian coffee market, had recently promoted the newly developed Ethiopian coffee national brand to the Chinese market during an exhibition held in China, Debela said. Coffee export is often referred to as the backbone of Ethiopia's economy, in which the country's traditional top 5 coffee export destinations are the US, Japan, Germany, Belgium, and Saudi Arabia. The country is presently working hard to expand its reach and take advantage of the emerging Chinese coffee market, according to Junwa.
This city is the city of the most industrious people. This is a city of hardworking people. The typical Alabama is a wise man. In trade and commerce, this is the city. This is ABA, and this is me, Rough Cornwall, by telling you about my city.
And finally, Somalia will hold its presidential election on October 10th, the country's prime minister announced on Tuesday. A meeting of the country's leaders in Mogadishu also reached a deal on elections for both houses of parliament. President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed and the leaders of Somalia's 5 states had been unable to agree on the terms of a vote before his term lapsed in February, triggering an unprecedented constitutional crisis. The political impasse exploded into violence in April when negotiations collapsed and the lower house of parliament extended the president's mandate by 2 years. Under pressure, the president, commonly known as Farmajo, reversed the mandate extension and ordered his prime minister to reconvene with the state leaders to chart a fresh roadmap towards election, and that's according to Africa News.